Well, good. Good to see you all. When I saw they wanted me to talk about, giving away what you got, essentially, I thought if we were going to be talking about, fundraising and how you become generous and all. I found, no, it's about what are the skills that the Lord gives you, and how can you use those to make a difference. And the first thing I wanted to say to you is that learning about the skills and the talents that you have is a journey. You don't all of a sudden discover them when you're 10 years old and that's what you do the rest of your life. It's a journey. And one of the things I want to make sure you understand too is don't let other people tell you what you're good at. I mean, feedback is good, but don't let people discourage you from a journey you might be on to say, no, that's not who you are. I'm not talking about feedback on little things. I'm talking about big things. And my own story is an interesting one because I love John Lennon. He said, life is what happens to you when you're planning on doing something else. Have you ever heard that quote? And I think also until God decides how he wants to use you, I would add to that. But when I was in high school, I took one of those vocational preference tests, and it said that I should be a salesperson, a salesman, And I said, oh, that's great. What I'll do is I'll graduate from high school, go to a good Ivy League school, get a gentleman's 75 average, and then sell my body to Pillsbury or General Motors or something. Be a salesman. That sounds good. And so I end up going to Cornell, and which was a fun place to be and an interesting place. And my junior year, Richardson Merrill had a summer sales program for juniors in college, and they went all around the country looking for candidates to be in this program. And they chose 20 finalists to go to New York City, and they were going to take, I think, 12 out of the 20 to put in the program. And the program was really fascinating because they trained you for 4 weeks, and they put you with one of their salespeople for 4 weeks, and then they gave you your own district for 4 weeks. And I thought, wow, this is great. So I applied with a good friend of mine. We both got in the finals, and we went down to New York and had all the interviews and all. And when the thing came out, neither my friend or I made it. We were not one of the 12. I couldn't believe it. And I wrote the vice president and said, you obviously made a mistake, that George Malty and I could outsell any of the people you hired. And he had never gotten a letter quite like that. But I decided to kiss off sales. If they're that stupid, why would I want to be a salesperson? So I was working as a dorm counselor in one of the freshman dormitories to help pay for school. I said, well, I think I'll be a dean of students, dean of men. That sounds like fun. And people say, yeah, I think you'd be great at that, but you have to go to graduate school. I said, graduate school? How am I going to go with my average, And I could never take tests and all. And they said, well, apply. And I applied all around, couldn't get in anywhere. But one of the deans had gotten a master's degree at Colgate in education, and he called them and got me provisionally accepted, which is they would let me in as long as I had straight B's the first semester, and if I didn't, they would kick me out. So I went over to Colgate in the School of Education, and I started taking these education courses, and they were so boring. I had been a government major, and I couldn't stand it. So about the second week of classes, I'm at the bar at the Colgate Inn, thinking, I cannot believe I'm going to do this for a couple of years. And the way God works, he puts a young assistant professor of sociology next to me, and he had just come to Colgate, and his wife was back in Illinois packing, and he was staying at the inn. And so I started to moan and groan to him. And he said, why don't you come and major with me in sociology? And I said, what's sociology? He said, we study leadership and groups. And I said, that sounds pretty interesting. Can I do that? He said, I'm sure they'll probably let me do it. I'm new. So I transferred. I get a master's in sociology, see. So now I'm ready to be a dean, see. And they said, no, you have to get a doctor's degree. I said, you got to be kidding me, I remember when I graduated as an undergrad, the doctoral candidates walked across and shook the hand of the president. They must really be bright. I found out later they're not. It's really an endurance contest. It has nothing to do with intelligence. There was a lot of bright people. So I said, I don't know how I'm going to get any of these, so I applied and couldn't get in anywhere. But when I didn't get in that summer sales program, I decided to play golf for the summer up at Cornell. They got a great course. But I took a couple of courses early in the morning to lighten my load for my senior year. And one of the courses was on educational leadership. And we were only 10 in the class, and the guy was a great guy. So I called him, Don McCarty, and I said, Don, is there any chance you get me provisionally accepted into the doctoral program? And he said, Ken, I think I could do it. So I got provisionally accepted. And so I got in the doctoral program, and the best preparation for doctoral work is playing competitive sports, because these egomaniac professors, they hit you a lot, and you have to bob and weave and get up off the floor and all that. But I'm about ready to finish up, and so I go down to the American Associations of Guidance Counselors and Deans or something like that, and to interview for a job, because I'm going to have a doctor's degree. And so I went down there, but my belief is one of the problems with the Dean of Men and Dean of Students office, it's usually in the basement floor of the administration building, and that's where it is in the hierarchy. Nobody pays much attention to them. And I thought that's stupid, because I think that the real discussion in universities ought to be between the faculty, who are experts on curriculum, and the student personnel people, who should be experts on the environment, and how do we create a learning environment that's good for what the professors want to teach. So all the jobs I was looking for were working with faculty. So I had a great interview at Dartmouth, Wesleyan in Connecticut, Northern Illinois, Colorado State, and they all said, we're going to invite you, Ken, to the university, to come onto campus for an interview, and I never heard from any of them. So I called this guy at Dartmouth, who I had gone out and drank with, and I said, John, you said you were going to invite me on campus. Why didn't you? He said, Ken, I feel badly. He said, but you have 2 terrible recommendations in your placement file. In those days, if older folks, you have a placement file and you would ask people to write recommendations, but you couldn't read them. It wasn't this open stuff now. Everybody can read everything, so recommendations don't mean anything. So I said, who are the bad recommendations from? He said, the Dean of Students and the Associate Dean. Oh, I said, that's very helpful. What did the dean say? He said, Ken Blanchard's a wonderful guy. He's great working in the dormitories, but don't let him near the faculty. He has no academic interest. I couldn't believe he said that. I took his course. We called it Sleeping with Stan. It was terrible. And he says, I got no academic interest, see? And then I said, well, what did the associate dean say? He said, Ken Blanchard's a wonderful guy, not particularly intelligent, but, so I'm dead, see? And I go back to the bar, and there's a guy there who had gone to Harvard Business School, and he was working his way through by playing the piano in this bar. And I had met him before, and I sat with him at a break, told him my story. He said, oh, Vern Alden, who used to be the associate dean of Harvard Business School when I was there, he's the new president of Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And I know him well. He said, write Vern and tell him about your situation, and I'm sure he'll find something for him. So I wrote President Alden, and he sent my credentials to the dean of the business school, see. So he calls me, and he says, Ken, he said, you got a crazy background, but we got crazy people out here. I'm looking for a new assistant dean. Why don't you come on out, see? And so, my wife says, Athens, Ohio, where's that, And so we ended up going out there, and when I get there, the dean says, Ken, I want you to teach a course. I want all my deans to teach. And I had never thought about teaching because my faculty in graduate school all said I couldn't write. And if I wanted to be in a university, I needed to be an administrator, because if you can't write, you perish, because you have to publish. So I had never thought of it. I later found out that they could understand my writing, and that confused them. So I had never thought about teaching. I don't care. He said, why don't you teach a course? So Paul Hersey had arrived, and they gave me a management course to teach in Hersey's department. And I went in and taught, and after 2 weeks, I came home and I said to Margie, this is what I ought to be doing, teaching. This is fabulous. And she said, what about writing? I said, I don't know. We'll figure something out, And then I heard Hersey taught a great leadership course, so I went up to him and said, Paul, can I sit in your course next semester? And he said, nobody audits my course. You want to take it for credit, you're welcome. I thought that was interesting. I had a doctor's degree and he didn't, and he wants me to take his course. But his belief was that if you audited, you didn't do anything. But if you took it for credit, you had to write the papers and all. So I told Margie what Paul said, and she said, is he any good? I said, he's supposed to be great. She said, well, get your ego out of the way and take his course. And so I had to talk to the registrar because I already had a doctor's degree to take an undergraduate course. But they let me, and so it was really it was a great course. And in June, after the course, Hersey comes to my office, and he said, Ken, I've been teaching leadership for 10 years. I think I'm better than anybody, but he said, writing is a real problem for me. I really get. And he said, you did a dissertation on leadership. You understand leadership and all. And I've been looking for somebody who's also a good writer to write a textbook with me. They want to do that. Would you do that? And I said, we ought to be great partners. You can't write, and I'm not supposed to. Let's do it, see? And so we wrote a textbook called Management of Organizational Behavior. It just came out in its 10th edition. It sells more today than it did in the 60s. And so I went to the dean, and I said, I quit as an administrator. I'm going to be a faculty member. I got a book now. He said, you can't quit. I said, why not? He said, because I was going to fire you. I said, why? He said, because you're a lousy administrator, which I was. And so we agreed it was a photo finish between him firing me and me quitting. And so that got me going, And then I taught at the University of Massachusetts, and then I got a sabbatical to go to California. And I was thinking about that because we went out for 1 year to San Diego. And after 6 months, Margie said, we're going to go back to Massachusetts. It's a little bit like Wisconsin. Summer in Massachusetts is 2 weeks of bad skating. So we've been there for 40 years and started our own company. But early on, we went to a cocktail party by an author in town and invited all the other authors that she could find in town. And Spencer Johnson was there, and I don't know if any of you know, he wrote children's books. Spencer wrote The 1 Minute Manager with me, and then he wrote Who Moved My Cheese. I wrote the foreword to that. But before that, he wrote kids' books, the Value Tales series, the value of, courage, the story of Jackie Robinson, the value of a sense of humor, the story of Will Rogers and all. They were really successful. So Margie meets him at this cocktail party, and she carries him over to me. She said, you guys should write a children's book for managers. They won't read anything else. And so he was working on a 1-minute scolding on how to discipline kids with a psychiatrist. So I invited him to a seminar I was doing. He laughed all day. Comes running up. He said, forget parenting. Let's do the 1-minute manager. And since he's a children's book writer and I'm a storyteller, we write this silly little parable about this young man searching for an effective manager. I mean, it was 100 pages with a lot of white space and all. We went to publishers and they said, you want to charge $20 for this little thing? I don't even know if anybody would read it. This is before anybody was writing parable management books and all that kind of thing. And we were on the Today Show in Labor Day 1982, and it goes on the bestseller list a week later. It never left for 3 years and still sells 200,000 or 300,000 copies a year. 35 years later, we're going, duh. But the point I wanted to make is that I didn't know my skills was in writing, because people said I couldn't write. And then I found out that, well, wow, given a chance, try things. See, you got to keep your head up in life in terms of where your skills are and not just depend on people telling you what you're good at and what you should do. Now, the thing, and I talked about Lead Like Jesus in there and about the heart of Lead Like Jesus, which is about your character and who you are. But there's two questions if we're going to get to how do you share what you do. These two questions you got to answer first. And the first question is, whose are you? And that question is, who do you belong to? And as we've been hearing today, and we heard it from Jip this morning, is you belong to God. That's who you belong to. And I mentioned this morning to somebody that I was on this program with Tom Landry, and somebody said, how do you stay so calm in the midst of this crazy game of football? And he said, it's easy. I have my priorities in order. First comes God, second comes my wife, third comes my kids, and fourth comes my job. So if I lose on on Sunday I have a lot left over, and a lot of people lose on Sunday, they have nothing left over. And so the first question you have to ask, I think, in your life as you're thinking about your skills is, whose are you? And if you recognize that you're God's, and Chip was talking about God absolutely loves you and cares about you and all, and He wants you to what? Be successful. And He's given us all different skills. People all have different kinds of skills. But you're going to find out those skills much easier when you first recognize that whose you are is Him. And kind of ask and say, what should I be doing? What is the things that I need to do? And so that's a very important question, which is whose you are. And we think that's just key. I mean, you can't lead like Jesus without Jesus, and you can't talk about Jesus without His relationship to His Father and also to the Holy Spirit, And so but that first question you want to ask all of us, because one of the things that a lot of people think is that they own their skills. They own their house. They own their resources. They own that. Nah, you don't own anything. It's all on loan. Who's it on loan from? It's on loan from the good Lord. And if you recognize it's on loan, then the big question is, what are you doing to steward what's on loan to you? But you first got to know that it's on loan. Now, the second question you need to ask, which helps you to start talking about, what are your skills that you can maybe start to share and all, is who are you? And who are you is different than whose are you. Whose are you? You're God's. Who are you is why did He put you here? See, I think we're all put here for a purpose, and it takes us time to really find out what that purpose is. And so what I'd like to do, and we're going to do it, and I think you'll get a kick out of it. How many of you all have a mission or a purpose statement? You see how few hands are? How many of you have an organization that has a mission or a purpose statement? Okay? Why don't you have a personal one? I mean, how do you know to make decisions if you don't know what business you're in? I mean, a lot of people go, oh, duh. So we're going to write a mission statement for you right now. It'll be the first draft, and here's what we're going to do. It's in 3 stages. What I want you to do first is think about, and get a piece of paper if you can, but think about 2 nouns that describe strengths that you think you have, okay? 2 nouns that describe, and that noun could be courageous, it could be sense of humor, it could be a speaker, it could be decision maker, it could be, my 2 ones I picked on was teacher and example as nouns. So if somebody said to you, tell me 2 nouns that describe things that you're really good at, what would you say? So have all of you think of a couple of nouns, all righty? Yes, Father. So all you have a couple of things that you've thought about? You can play with this later, but now what I want you to think about is 2 verbs that describe how you like to influence others. It could be motivate, it could be help, it could be persuade, it could be lead, it could be encourage, it could be a whole bunch of, what kind of nouns? I like to encourage, I like to lead, I like to motivate, I like to do what? What are some verbs that describe how you like to best interact with other people? Does everybody have a couple of nouns and a couple of verbs? Now the third part is, What's your image of a perfect world? It could be a perfect world where people love each other, respect each other, and are able to cooperate and work together. I mean, that's just something off the top of my head. What's a perfect world to you? Perfect world is where everybody understands that Jesus is the greatest leader, greatest spiritual leader, greatest human being that ever walked the earth, and they know he loves them. I don't know. I mean, what's a perfect world to you? If you could sort of say, boy, I wish everybody in the world could understand this image of the world. We could really use these images, I think, now. What's your image of a perfect world? We're going to gather these up and send them to President Trump. Okay. Now, if you're going to have a mission statement, you're going to take your nouns and your verbs and your perfect world and put them together. So, for example, with me, my mission statement, my purpose statement is to be a loving teacher and example. Those are my two nouns, of simple truths. So I'm a loving teacher and example of simple truths. That helps and motivates, those are my verbs, helps and motivates myself and others to awaken to the presence of God in our lives so we realize that we're here on earth to serve, not to be served. And that's my mission statement. So it's to be a loving teacher and example of simple truths that helps and motivates myself and others to awaken to the presence of God in our lives so we realize that we're here to serve and not be served. Okay? So put those three together and you got your first draft of a purpose statement. This will be fun for you. Put those beauties together and you got yourself a first start. Has anybody completed it who would be willing to share with us so people could hear a couple of examples and all? And if you share, it's bound to come completely true. So can I get somebody to share? Start off. I can wait, really. Okay, here's somebody who'll share.
As a coach and mentor to enable, encourage, and empower, I use three, sorry, that's okay.
That's all right.
People to be all that God would have them to be.
All right, let's give them a hand. Thank you. Who else would be willing to share? Anybody else? This is a tough group. Wisconsin, you beat Kentucky. You should be willing to share. Here, I got one here. He saved you. Boston, my
God. I would like to love and work hard to help and guide unity and diversity with Jesus at the center of life.
Oh, okay. So he wants to guide people at the center of life. All right. Can I get one more to share? Somebody on this side of the room has got to be able to shares. A lot of tight underwear, I think, here, really. Oh, there's a man saved the day. I'm a passionate, determined teacher of God's truth, preventing injustice in the world. All right, that's great. Okay, so now this is a start, okay? And we don't have time to do it, but a compelling vision tells first your purpose statement, then the picture of the future. And what I recommend you all do, which I've done, I should have brought it to read you, I wrote my own obituary, because that's a picture of the future and how you'd like to be remembered, you know. And I got that idea originally, if you remember Alfred Nobel, his brother died in the beginning of the last century, and he went to the newspaper in Stockholm, Sweden, to see what they said about his brother, and they got he and his brother mixed up, and he had the interesting thing of reading his own obituary in the paper. And those of you in high school remember that Alfred Nobel was involved in the invention of what? Dynamite. And so his obituary was all about destruction and things like that, and he was just devastated that how he was going to be remembered was about destruction. And so he gathered friends and loved ones around him and said, you know, what's the opposite of destruction? And what they said was what? Peace. And so he redesigned his life. So when he died, what was he known for? The Nobel Peace Prize and peace and all. He rewrote his obituary. I think Jimmy Carter rewrote his obituary. Because if he had gone off in the sunset like most presidents do, like Bush has disappeared and all, we would have said he was a nice guy, not a particularly great president. But now what we say about Jimmy Carter, he's probably the greatest ex-president that we've ever had. Look what he's done with Habitat for Humanity and all the things that... I was on a plane recently, and he and his wife were on the plane. He's 92 years old. And the plane took off, he got up and walked around the plane and shook everybody's hand in the place at 90-something years old. I mean, what a sweetheart he is. And he rewrote his obituary. So how would you like to be remembered? I made a video for my funeral. My wife said, you're a little morbid, but I have to redo it because it was, you know, a few years ago. But I said, you know, if you're watching this video, I'm not here, obviously, in person, but I want to just tell you about, you know, about myself, you know, because why wouldn't you want to talk about yourself? Let all these other people say what you were, you know, and so write a mission, an obituary, and you might want to do this over the next week and share it with your spouse or close people and say, what do you think about this? Would this be a fair description? And then the third part of a compelling vision is, what are your values? And think about what are your values, you know, in terms of, you know, I think as a follower of Jesus, your values probably would be around love and grace and forgiveness and integrity and things like that. And I have 4 values that I've chosen over time. Number 1 is spiritual peace. And number 2 is integrity. My father said that when all is said and done, you're going to really be known by your integrity. Did you keep your word and all? And the third one, you know, is all about love. And the fourth one is joy. And what I have under each of my values, and I learned that from Tony Robbins, and some people say, how can you talk about Tony Robbins, you know? And the religious right attacked me because I wrote the foreword to his first book, and I endorsed Deepak Chopra, and I was a friend of Wayne Dyer's and all. How can you turn your back on people, because we don't have a chance with them if we don't? And Tony Robbins is a new Christian, which is a really exciting thing, and we're talking about what that means and all that kind of thing. And so, he told me that under your values, if you just write values and you look at them, they don't mean anything. You need to say, I say, I value spiritual peace. And then you write these words down. And I know when I'm living by that value, whenever and then put 3 or 4 dots. So I know I am living by my value of spiritual peace anytime I wake up in the morning, grateful for my blessings, feeling great about my family and the beauty of my surroundings. I know, second bullet is I know I have spiritual peace anytime I recognize that God loves me no matter what. It's unconditional love. And I know I have spiritual peace whenever I pray and talk to the Lord and feel like I am heard. So I look at those, and I have bullets under each of my values. So you might want to think about what are your values and then put some bullets under those so that you can do that. Now, what do you do with these things? Now, you can also create some goals. See, purpose tells you what business you're in. Your obituary tells you, where you're headed, what you want to be remembered for. And your values tell you what will guide your journey. And your goals tell you what should I focus on right now. And so a lot of people, they might even do these kind of things, but then what they do is they file them. If I was talking in the session, they don't ever look at them. No, you see a lot of people and they say, what are the values in your company, And they say, I don't know, look on the wall, they're up there. But, nobody knows them and all. You got to figure a way to practice them. And so I was talking a little bit earlier about you need to enter your day slowly, and entering your day slowly is a beginning way to not only remind yourself whose you are, but get in touch with who you are. And when you get in touch with that, now you can start to look at what are my skills, what are the opportunities I have. And so one of the things that we do in our Lead Like Jesus thing is that we send people off in the training for about 40 minutes, and we tell them you can't take a phone, you can't take anything to write with, you can't listen, and you just need to spend some quiet time with the Lord, just quiet time. And that blows people's mind. Most people have never spent any time with Him. And one of the things that we say to them, and I do this in the morning, is put your hands on your knees, and you can do that when you're on the side of your bed. And the first thing you do is think about what are your concerns about today, or what are the things you have to accomplish today, and lay those down at the foot of the cross. But think about whatever you're concerned about or worried about or focused on. And when you finish that list, now turn your hands upward and listen. Just shut your mouth for about 5 minutes or 10 minutes and see if the Lord has anything to say. The reason the Lord doesn't speak to you is because you're mouthing off all the time, And so you just might want to try that. And then after that, what do? So I read my mission statement, I read my obituary, and I read my values. Why? Because I want that to guide my behavior during the day. And so that really gets things started, It really is a powerful thing about, entering your day slowly like that. And then what do you do with that? Well, at the end of the day, what do you do? And Bill Hybels is a important person in my life. He was one of the key people on my spiritual journey that got me to follow the Lord. And Bill never had a journal. How many of you journal? Not a lot of people journal, and Bill said, I never journaled because Bill's competitive. I don't know if you know, he's an incredible sailor. And he asked me to, be a mate in a race, and it wasn't even a big race. And I want to tell you, I don't know where the Lord was in the boat, but Bill wanted to beat everybody out there, I mean, he was really great. And but he never had written a journal because he's competitive, and he said, I know people who write journals in 4 colors, and they write poetry, and so he said, how can I compete with that? And he was the chaplain for the Chicago Bears when Singletary was there, and he would run a Bible study for the players who wanted to go the next day after they had finished the game. And after Bible study, everybody would gather together and look at the game films from the day before, and they would talk about what did they do well and what would they like to do different the next time. And Bill's driving back to the church one day, and he goes, duh. that's what a journal ought to be, because nobody else can have a journal like that. So he started writing a journal, and I've started that. At the end of the day, in a journal, you write praisings, and then write down, what did you do today that's consistent with your purpose, your picture of the future, and your values, and all that you really feel good about, So praise yourself, man. I felt really good. Boy, I really listened to Roberta. She had a real problem, and I had to run for a meeting, but I could see she was, and so I stopped and really focused on her for a couple of minutes, and I was really proud that I did, whatever. And then he said, after you do the praisings, then write redirections, which is, what would I like to replay that I did today that I don't feel so good about? And I wrote a book called The 1 Minute Apology, so you could maybe next day go and apologize for something that you did that you'd rather not. But I want to tell you, nobody could write a journal like that. And if you had a journal at the end of every day where in the beginning of the day you looked at your purpose, your picture of the future, your obituary, your values and goals, and at the end of the day you said praisings and redirections, I want to tell you what a powerful journey that would be, because what did Plato say? A life unexamined is not worth living. And so that's a really great thing for you to think about doing. And while you're also doing that, when you got clear about, whose you are, you're the Lord's, and then who you are in terms of your vision, in terms of purpose and picture of the future and values and goals and all, then you can start to think, what do I have to learn? What do I have to do? Is there any skills that I'm good at that I haven't been doing? And how can you tell that you are doing what God's gifts are to you? You're confused about the difference between work and play. I want to tell you, the happiest people I know are absolutely doing what God designed them to do. And if you're saying, thank God it's Friday in the world of work, you're in the wrong job. You ought to just, wow, this was a great week. I can't wait for Monday or whatever. You're really excited about what you do. You're probably doing what you wanted to do. And I tell you, I'm really psyched about what I'm doing now, and doing most of the work, for the kingdom and all. Lead Like Jesus is in 40 nations, and we're just having a lot of fun and all. And you all can do me a favor, take Lead Like Jesus back to your churches, back to your organizations, because it ought to be the foundation for the way you do leadership training. Then you can put everything else about it. We have more trouble with churches, though. They say, we have our own leadership training program. And I says, but I bet you don't have Jesus' leadership program, if it's your own. I said, this isn't Ken Blanchard's program. This is Jesus' program. When we came out with our book, Lead Like Jesus, we didn't want to put our names on it. And the publisher says, oh, no, you got to do it. But I said, well, Jesus' name is better than my name. No, you got to put your name on. But the point is what can you be doing? And that makes you confused about what you're doing. And that's where you are. And as I told you about my journey, it took me a number of years to realize what I really loved to do was what? To teach and to write and to motivate, and all that kind of thing, which I never had thought about, I had thought I was going to be a salesman, and then I was going to be a dean of students, and I was going to do this and that, But God had different plans for me. And so when you sort of realize that He's there for you, and He loves you, and whose you are is Him, then He'll get the word to you. And so that's really my big message for you today. And I'd love to see if there's any questions or statements at all. We got about 5 minutes that we could do that before they race us. This is an exhausting conference, I'm having 3 people carry me out of here. But any questions or things that I could help you with or answer? Or you can. I was, I think I was about 48 years old or something like that. It was really interesting. I was actually named after a Presbyterian minister. My parents loved this one guy. My middle name's Hartley, and I went to Sunday school and all, but they didn't talk much about Jesus. And in junior high school, I switched to the Methodist church because they had a better basketball team. And then I, of course, went to Cornell, and they could have cared less about the Lord, And then Margie said, well, we ought to go back and do some church stuff. And a lot of people, it's so interesting when you call yourself a Christian, like the data suggests to a lot of people that Christian marriages break up at the same rate as every other marriage, which is about 55%. I did a sermon at our church on marriage, and I really researched that. That is not true if you do 4 things as a Christian. See, we're not talking about calling yourself a Christian. We're talking about what being a Christian. And if you do these 4 things, the divorce rate is about 6 or 7%. If you and your spouse go to church together. 2, if you read the Bible separately and together. Okay. If you pray separately and together. And the last one I love, if you realize that neither one of you is perfect. In other words, you're both sinners and all. And just think, now that's not just, and so a lot of people say, what are you? I'm a Christian. Well, they go to church at Christmas and Easter. They're a Christian. They're not, They're getting divorced like everybody else, But I want to tell you, if you go to church together, you pray together, you read the Bible together, and you realize you're not perfect, you got a very low possibility of getting out of wedlock. And I think that's a powerful thing. And so it was a journey, and Margie luckily took the journey with me, and we're having so much fun doing those things together. And she said, I already knew you weren't perfect, And Margie said our marriage finally became good when she decided to fall in love with the total package, which is what she really fell in love about me and what bugged her about me. And what's really interesting is if you have that kind of love, the things that are maybe a problem in your behavior, you can start working on because it's a loving environment. But a lot of people don't like to go home because all they're going to do is get picked on, see? And what happens is in marriages, when you first fall in love, everything is great, and your friends say, I don't think she's right. Oh, no, she's just perfect, And then you move in with them and you say, what the hell was that? I mean, you got to be kidding me, And so all of a sudden you start to focus on the negative. And people say, well, how do you turn a bad marriage around? And of all the things I've ever taught for 45 years, if you said, Blanchard, I'm going to take one thing away from you, and this also ties into Jesus, though, what would you hold on to? And I would hold on to the second secret of the 1-minute manager is wander around and see if you can catch people doing things right. I mean, Jesus was trying to catch people doing things right and accenting the positive. And, he would say, and for that, your sins are forgiven. Somebody just, this terrible sinner just got came, and for that, I mean, he was always looking to catch people doing things right. If you want to turn a marriage or work relationship and all, start focusing on the positive and start focusing on what's wrong. And then you can actually have it. See, human relations is about money in the bank. And every time you catch somebody doing something right, it puts something in your bank. So if you have to talk to them about some behavior that's a problem or a performance, you're taking something out of your bank, but you got something in it. A lot of people want to tell somebody something, they got nothing in the bank. You need a gun and a mask to get anything out of that. So, well, they say our time is had, so you better race to the next place, And